Explain what I'm doing. I was turning these axle blanks and the finish is okay, not a major problem, but I found that there's a very slight taper, and I've tried taking it out because I was running it into the centre. I tried using that and that's more or less got rid of it, but I couldn't quite. So I thought what I'll do is I'll make a test bar up, and I've got a piece of tool steel 3/4 inch, so I put it in the fore jaw. The plan was then to just centre it, flip it round, do the same the other side, so I know I've got some nicely centred material. And if I do that, so I can turn it, and that's quite nice. That's God, that's a half a thou. It's about 1/10 of a thou run out, so that's not too bad. However, if I grab hold of the side of the fore jaw and push it, I'm getting quite a lot of movement. So I think my problem is not so much that, it's the fact that my spindle bearings are very slightly slack. So I'm going to have to look at the other side, let's say push, give that a good strong push, and I'm getting a movement on the needle which I shouldn't be. So that obviously means that once I'm actually cutting, it's pushing the spindle nose across slightly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look at the back here. I've looked at the manual, it says nothing about adjusting the spindle bearings, predictably. But looking at this, there's a cover on the back here with 4 bolts holding it on, and I think if I take that off, that should allow me to access the adjustment nut for this spindle. And then I can just take that up a little bit, make sure it doesn't bind, and then see if it does anything to improve the situation with the in fact, if I put that in there, yeah, I'm getting over a thou movement back to front on that, or side to side, and also that explains why I got some movement when I was doing it that way. Okay, so I'll have a play with that now at the back here and see if I can get that cover off and find the nut. So I've taken the rear cover off. I've just removed the drive gears. I'll give those a bit of a clean up as well. Yeah, this doesn't look particularly inspiring in here in terms of cleanliness. I just need to be a little bit careful with some of these things to make sure that I put them all back on where they need to go. So I'll just stick that back on there. And this one just drops out. Okay, that's taken that off. Let's find a piece of rag. Now I've unscrewed the 4 bolts from there. There are 2 bolts, top and bottom, which form a jacking system. That one won't go any much further. And then this whole thing should then come out quite nicely, which it does. Let's get that off the end there. So it's a nice light alloy cover. All the oil is nice and clean in there. Better than I expected. That's good. Okay. So the way this works then is that I've got two, turn that around so I can actually turn it. Okay, so I've got two Allen screws in there to loosen off. That will loosen the nut so that it can be turned. At the moment, the way this is done, this is a split nut, and I would assume that by undoing the Allen screws there, it enables it to flex back out, and therefore you can then adjust that up. Right, let's find the correct size of Allen key for that. It's not that one. It's going to be an imperial. So let's go and try and find an Allen key and I'll come back. So I've managed to get an 1/8 inch Allen bit. Right, that's that. Now let's see if I can get my adjustable. Move that round a bit. Well, from what I can see, that's improved it. Okay, so that's that there, that's that done. in there. That back out of the way. So I'll get the two jacking bolts screws out. I'll then put the 4 screws back in that hold it all down. And then I can just reassemble this, and hopefully that will have sorted out the little issue. Next quarter and opposite. Okay, so that's taken that up a little bit on the main bearings. Oh, while I'm here, let's just grab a bit of cleaner and we'll give it a quick squirt. Well, I'll just put this back on. I've had a bit of a clean up. A little bit of rocking clearance there. That's nice and tight. That one's not, but that will be in a moment. That's on its splines. There's a little bit of rock in there. That's good. And that's now tight. So, in theory, that should all now do what it is supposed to. Excellent. That's nice and clear, and it's lunchtime. Right, so that's back together. I've tightened that up a little bit, hopefully enough, but it's only a half-hour job to take the back end off and tighten it up again if I need any more. Right, I'll come back and look at that later. Right, let's have a quick recheck on that side. That's that to that. .365, and then I've got a, loosen that off. .1475 deep. And if I can turn that round more that way, I can then get in and check the width. .3145. I need to turn a disc which is thick enough. We'll go over there fairly easily, so I want that to be what? .250, hole in the middle. So I'll give plenty of clearance on that. 2.3. That'll enable me to get over there, sit against that, and then attach a handle to it of some description. Okay, And before I do any more, I'm going to put this all back together again now, because obviously I'm going to need this lathe to do silly things like turn stuff. Right, so that's the back end back together. And if I use the 4-jaw, I can now look at spinning up some metal to make a piece, a spanner to adjust the nut. Hey ho. I'm going to open my package. I made a decision last week when I was doing some turning and using the centres that I wasn't doing it right, because to be quite honest, I was being a cheapskate. And what I was using was a replaceable centre, running centre, but it's got a 2 Morse taper, so it will fit on the method, and it's in a drill sleeve, which I will be able to get out, I hope. No, I know I can. I'll just use a small old ball bearing in there. But I thought, well, I'm not really doing it properly, am I? And if I'm going to be trying to turn quality bits on a lathe, I ought to really make sure I've actually got a centre that fits the lathe, rather than one that's got a sleeve on it, which is potentially introducing inaccuracies. So I've gone to a company up north called EW Tooling, and I've got a relatively inexpensive, centre, which is 3 Morse taper. So it will drop straight into the tailstock, and it's got a small diameter head with a fairly narrow tip on it, so it should enable me to get into fairly small spaces. The other one I have, which is a 3 Morse taper, is a bit bigger. It was cheap. It's okay, but it's nothing special. I'm hopeful that this one will give me what I want. So I found a sharp edge where the 2 joins are. Once I started pulling them apart, managed to slice my finger quite nicely. So I've had my bandsaw chewing away at this. It's not going to go in there, so it's going to have to go into the inner one. might be a bit cruel here. I'm going to put drill a centre hole in it, and then might just push this a little bit and see how it actually deals with a big drill, because the hole in the middle I need to take out to over 2¼ inch, so I'll take it to about 2.5 inch, just so that it will go over the spindle. So I think what I will do, so that, what are we looking at? Go up to 770, I think, just to put the hole in. Right, where was I? Oh yeah, before the wife. Foggy in here, isn't it? All the way across. Yes, it is. Okay. So that's now flat and square. done what I want there. Let's see how it looks. Now swap it round and face off the other end. Yeah, needs another 10 shots out. Find a drill. Okay. That's that. That's about it. check on that. Right, 3.5. And I need to go down to 3.36. Excellent. Now let's have a quick measure of that. It's 1475. Take that off, that's fine for that. So what do we got here? Well, I bored this section out to 3.065. OD is 3.360. So the plan now is that I set this up on the mill. I'm going to mill back a third of an inch, 0.375. Which will enable me to push in and engage in the two teeth on the nut. Right, that's what I'll be doing on the mill. We're over at the mill. I've just put the spanner that I've turned up down on the mill bed, clamped it down either side. I'll double check the clamping in a moment. I've used the edge finder, not the centre finder, the edge finder, to go off both sides, and then use the DRO half to give me the centre. So I now know where I am. I've then done a little bit of calculation. I'm going to be putting a 12mm cutter in, which is 0.47244 of an inch. So the radius of that is 0.23622. So the centre line is there, and I've got 0.23622 overhanging this side. So I've got to move it that way to get to the, so the edge of the cutter is on the centre line. I then need to move across a further 0.15725. So in total, I've got to move over 0.39347. So if I move up 0.39347, and I'll do that on here. And I want to come very slightly inside that, but I can actually adjust it slightly with a file at the end. So that's 0.393. So as long as I don't come this side of minus 0.393, and then having cut away, and I've got to go down a depth of 0.1475. So I'll zero that off once I touch it. Go down that depth, machine all around that side, and then step back over, come back this side 0.3934. And then machine all round there, and that will then give me my two teeth upstanding, and I can then do any little fettling I might need to get them to fit nicely, and then I'll flip it over, drill a couple of holes in the back here, to enable me to fit a handle. I'll need to move the spindle around to get the spanner to the point where I can put it on, and then I can loosen it, tighten it as I need, hopefully. Right, let's change from the centre finder or the edge finder to the cutter, and then we'll crack on with that. Right, let's have a quick double check here. That's a little bit out of... That shouldn't be doing that. Hey ho. But that's close. A little bit of fettling with a file and those two slots will be spot on. Right, let's get that out now. So just tidy this up a little bit, I think. So I'm going to take that over to the bench. So where are we? Well, that's, you see that there. Got two teeth on there. On the back here, I'll put a couple of holes and then make a handle up to clamp on. Well, it's not pretty, but it will do the job. I hopefully do the job. just slacken those off. I'm not going to take them out, I just want to slacken them. So the theory is that this is pulling, you've got a slot down the side here on either side, and it will pull these two parts together, which will distort the thread slightly. Probably far too much, to be honest, but hey ho. That goes to there. Let's plonk that round. That's on the tightest of settings. So let's see what happens if I can get this on here. Good-o. It's going to need a tap. What I think's happened with this is that because that's distorted, it doesn't want to move at all. So it just needs a little bit of persuasion with a copper mallet. Not what I really want to do on bearings, but I don't have a lot of choice on this. Now I'm going to stop at that point. I've just taken that round a little bit more. There's no appreciable play. I'm still spinning. So the next thing will be, I'll put a chuck on the front and see if I can deflect the spindle at all at the nose end. Well, I hope you found that a little bit interesting. Excuse the noise in the background, the Air Force is playing games at the moment. They was enjoying themselves up there. Well, the end result of that was this, which is my nice new shop-made spanner to tighten up the adjusting nut on the back of the spindle of the Colchester. And it all worked. Well, actually, no, it didn't. The reason is that having had a good look at the drawings and the parts list, it shows that this has got gamut bearings in it. On the rear one, the preload on the bearings is adjusted by a number of springs that are built into the two halves of the bearing and that holds them apart, and when you screw the back in up against the stop on the step on the back of the spindle, it preloads the bearing by the requisite amount. So of course when I tightened it up, all I ended up doing was actually tightening it up against the back of the spindle, and it wouldn't tighten any more than that. So I've still got a little bit of movement. It's down to less than half a thou deflection. Still too much, because obviously if you've got a long bar, the deflection 2 foot out from the jaws is quite a lot. So I do need to get that done at some point, but I can live with it as it is until I can get hold of the springs from somewhere, dismantle the back end, take the rear part of the bearing out, and then put replacement springs in. The rest of the bearings are fine, there's no rumbling noise, they're all running nice and quietly, but it's that preload which seems to be missing. So a very successful period making a spanner, which I'm going to need. Unfortunately, the reason for making the spanner I can't do anything about at the moment. So I'll have to come back to you at some other point once I get hold of the parts that would enable me to do that. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed yourself, and I'll see you again at some other time in Dad's shed. Bye for now.